Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd, your provider of belief on demand.
Okay, let's sit with that quote for a second. Because today we're going to unpack the story of OpenAI, a company that, right from the very beginning, was about so much more than just a product. It was really about building a new kind of belief system, a mission, built on a technological promise, a promise for all of humanity.
So, to really get our heads around this thing, we've got a roadmap. We're going to start with that initial prophet's promise, then watch the whole thing crack open during the coup in Vegas. We'll look at the real-world human and planetary cost, decode the formula that powers this empire, and finally, land on the choice that we're all facing right now.
You see, OpenAI didn't start like a normal tech company. It didn't have a business plan. It had a prophecy. It was born as a nonprofit with this incredibly radical pledge to build artificial general intelligence, AGI, not for profit, but for the good of everyone.
And right away, you can see this tension, right? This gap between the public promise and the private thinking. The name itself, OpenAI, implies total transparency. But behind closed doors, they knew pretty much immediately that their definition of open was, let's say, flexible. The mission could be reinterpreted whenever it needed to be.
For years, though, that mission was the story. That was the face of the company. But then, on November 17th, 2023, that whole utopian project it cracked wide open very, very publicly.
So get this, Sam Altman is off at a Formula One race in Las Vegas. He gets called into a Google Meet, and his own board fires him, just like that. And the reason they gave was an absolute bombshell. He was not consistently candid. I mean, that's corporate speak for our CEO is lying to us, and it just shattered the company's carefully crafted image.
What happened next was just 5 days of pure chaos, playing out in real time on Twitter for all of us to watch. You had resignations, a threatened mass exodus of almost every employee to Microsoft, tense negotiations. This wasn't just some boardroom drama. It was a full-blown civil war over the soul of the company.
And this quote right here, just brilliantly lays out the core conflict. The board, whose entire job was to be the guardian of that original nonprofit mission, was literally willing to burn the multi-billion-dollar company to the ground to protect that mission. The company and the mission, it turns out, were not the same thing at all.
So what does it actually take to build this AI empire? Okay, let's pull back the curtain for a minute, because the real costs are staggering, and they're being paid by people and by a planet that are usually kept far, far away from the slick Silicon Valley presentations. First up, every empire needs raw materials. And just like the empires of old, this one gets them through a kind of mass extraction. It's called data colonialism, basically hoovering up the collective knowledge and creativity of all of humanity from the internet, our art, our writing, our conversations, and refining it all into a private, profitable product. But that raw material is messy, so the empire needs a hidden workforce to clean it up. They call it ghost work. Think of it as a vast, invisible human assembly line where thousands of low-paid workers do the traumatic, digital dirty work of sifting through hatred, violence, and abuse, all to make sure the AI sounds pleasant and safe for us to use. Now, this isn't some abstract idea. This is a very real human cost. To make one of their AI models safer, workers in Kenya were paid as little as $1.46 an hour to look at and label horrific, traumatic content. We're talking stuff that leaves people with lasting psychological scars. And the cost to the planet? It's just as steep. Training a big model like GPT-4 takes an unbelievable amount of energy and water. In this one case, it sucked up 11.5 million gallons of fresh, drinkable water in a single month, water that was diverted from communities in Iowa that were already facing a drought. So you have to ask, right? How does a company justify these huge costs? How do they get the world to not just go along with it, but to actually champion it? Well, they do it by creating this incredibly potent formula for grabbing up resources and power. The engine that drives this whole formula is this core contrast. You've got the public-facing mission, this beautiful utopian promise to help humanity. And that mission becomes the ultimate justification for the reality of the empire, an aggressive, secretive, for-profit machine that needs more and more data, more energy, and more capital to survive.
And this powers a simple but brilliant 3-step playbook. Step 1. Create a really big, kind of vague, noble-sounding mission. Step 2. Use that mission to justify an infinite appetite for resources. And step 3, the kicker, constantly reinterpret what the mission means to serve whatever the business needs at that moment.
This strategy was so core to what they were doing, they literally invented a new kind of company to make it work, the capped profit company. It's genius, really. It allowed OpenAI to raise billions of dollars from investors while still wearing the halo of a mission-driven nonprofit. The cap, by the way, was 100 times the investment. So a $10 million investment was capped at $1 billion, some cap.
And what about that ultimate goal, AGI? Well, even Sam Altman admits it's more of a rhetorical tool than a real thing. It's a ridiculous and meaningless term. It's a fantasy, a far-off prize that can be used to justify any cost and demand infinite resources right here, right now.
And so here we are. We've arrived at the choice. Now that we see the formula for building an empire, we have to take a hard look at the bill that comes with the utopia it's promising.
Maybe the best way to understand this whole thing is with an analogy. Think of it like a televangelist megachurch. There's this promise of a glorious coming salvation, in this case, AGI. That promise brings in billions in donations or, venture capital. But behind the curtain, there's a huge hidden cost, paid by exploited people and a drained planet. And the whole operation is justified by a day of reckoning that's always, conveniently, just over the horizon. The mission doesn't just excuse the empire, it actually fuels.
So, if you remember anything, remember these 3 things. First, promising to save humanity might just be the best business plan ever invented. Second, the friendly AI we interact with is often built on a hidden foundation of human exploitation. And third, this race for AGI isn't just happening on screens. It is physically reshaping our planet, consuming our shared water and energy.
And that brings us right back to the sentence that started it all, the one that exposed the conflict to the world. This single thought just perfectly captures that deep, maybe even impossible tension at the very heart of the AI revolution, the mission versus the company, the belief versus the business.
And that leaves us with one final crucial question. It's not just about AI, really. It's about any grand promise of progress that comes with a monumental price tag. The question is, who pays that price? And is it worth it?